Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are investigating a genuinely fascinating historical mystery. Now, when most of us think about the foundations of early Christianity, we immediately picture historical events happening in the first century, right? But what if I told you that the actual blueprint, the hidden underlying philosophical DNA of this entire theology, was actually forged centuries earlier by ancient Greek mystics and mathematicians? It's a profound intersection of history, philosophy, and religion, and we're going to unpack exactly how that happened.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did 700-year-old pagan philosophy end up becoming the vital ammunition in a massive theological war? Well, to understand that, we really have to look at the first 3 centuries after the birth of Christ. This was an era of incredibly intense, passionate debate about what the teachings of Jesus actually meant. And the intellectuals of that day, they didn't just look into a vacuum for answers. They looked to the most profound, established system of thought they had available to them, which was ancient Greek philosophy.
Looking at our timeline here, you can really trace the flow of these ideas. We start with the era of the great Greek philosophers around 700 BC, and then we fast forward to those fervent Christian debates happening between 100 and 325 AD. Now, actually, what's totally wild is that much of what we know about the losing side of these early debates was only unearthed pretty recently. In 1946, a worker in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, literally just stumbled upon a buried jar full of ancient texts. These were the Gnostic Gospels, and they completely blew the lid off a massive historical debate between a group known as the Gnostic Christians and the patristic fathers of the Orthodox Church. So here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll start with part 1, the early Christian debate. 2, Pythagoras and divine mathematics. 3, Heraclitus and the Logos. 4, Parmenides and the Absolute One. And finally, part 5, Plato's grand metaphysical synthesis. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the early Christian debate, essentially a battle for the soul. You see, this early Christian debate was nothing less than a high-stakes battle for the very soul of the religion. Between the Gnostic Christians and the patristic fathers, both sides fiercely claimed to be the true, authentic followers of Christ. And here is the truly fascinating part, the twist, really. To justify their opposing doctrines, both of these sides relied heavily on ancient Greek thought, specifically Middle and Neoplatonism. Whether they were trying to define the exact nature of God, the immortality of the human soul, or even what happens after death, they completely leaned on the conceptual framework of the Greeks. Ultimately, the patristic fathers won out. This culminated in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, which officially defined church dogma and totally rejected the Gnostic texts. But importantly, that Greek foundation, it absolutely remained. Which brings us right to section 2, Pythagoras and divine mathematics. To really understand that foundation we just talked about, we need to transition back in time to our very first philosophical suspect, Pythagoras. And yes, I'm talking about the exact same Pythagoras you probably remember from high school geometry. But he was so much more than just a mathematician. He was actually a mystic, and he gave us this incredible concept of cosmic harmony. He firmly believed the physical universe isn't just random chaos, it's organized by secret mathematics. It has this underlying divine order. Even more crucially for early Christianity, Pythagoras contributed the fundamental DNA of the immortal human soul. He proposed that the soul is literally of divine origin, and its ultimate purpose in life is to seek reunion with the one divine supreme being. This whole idea that reason and mathematics can reveal divine wisdom was a massive, massive leap forward. Moving forward in our timeline, we hit section 3, Heraclitus and the Logos. Meet our next suspect, Heraclitus. He was the philosopher of flux, famous for claiming that everything flows and nothing abides. But think about it. If everything is constantly changing, why doesn't the universe just instantly collapse into total chaos? Well, Heraclitus answered that with a really brilliant concept, the Logos. He defined the Logos as a transcendent divine law. It's the underlying order, the rationality that dictates harmony in a universe that is just completely full of conflicting opposites. So, the crucial point is, this exact concept of the Logos was directly adopted by early Christians. If you read the opening of the Gospel of John, it says, "In the beginning was the Word." But guess what? The original Greek for word is logos. The early Christians literally took Heraclitus' metaphysical principle of cosmic order and identified it directly with the figure of Christ. But hey, philosophy is never without its frictions, right? Enter section 4, Parmenides and the Absolute One. Parmenides introduced some profound tension into early Christian theology by radically challenging Heraclitus.
Let's contrast these two fundamentally opposed views, because it's a huge clash. Heraclitus, as we saw, was all about becoming. The universe is a flowing river of constant change. Parmenides, on the other hand, argued for being. He believed that true reality absolutely cannot change. For him, true reality must be a logically indivisible, permanent, and completely unchanging supreme being. He argued that all this material world we see constantly shifting and changing around us, it's essentially just a secondary reality. It's mere appearances.
Look at Parmenides' schema here. It creates this incredibly harsh divide. Up at the top, we have the one being, which is ultimate truth, and it is separated completely from the bottom, which represents the world of motion and change, the world we actually live in. Because the supreme being is so utterly removed from our physical reality, Parmenides argued that its true essence is completely, 100% unknowable to the human mind. And this concept of an entirely unknowable supreme being, it was massively influential. Just look at this quote from Gregory of Nyssa, one of the really prominent patristic Christian fathers. He says, "The vision of God consists in this, that God cannot be seen, since what we seek is beyond all knowledge." I mean, wow, the early Christian fathers directly adopted Parmenides' concept. They agreed that the absolute one God is completely incomprehensible in essence, which really laid the groundwork for a deeply, deeply mysterious theology. All right, we've got a massive problem to solve now, which brings us to Section 5, Plato's Grand Metaphysical Synthesis. So, Parmenides left us with a huge dilemma. If God is completely separate and totally unknowable, how on earth do we relate to him? For that matter, how was the world even created? Enter the ultimate philosophical problem solver, Plato. Plato masterfully merged Parmenides' idea of unchanging being with Heraclitus' reality of becoming, and he did this through his famous theory of forms. He proposed that there was a higher realm containing eternal, unchanging, pure abstract ideas, things like absolute beauty, justice, and goodness. And these forms, they act as the ultimate metaphysical blueprint in the divine mind. Everything in our messy physical world is just an imperfect copy, a shadow of those pure, eternal forms.
To really ground these heavy metaphysical concepts, let's look at Plato's absolute classic, The Allegory of the Cave. Imagine prisoners chained in a dark cave, and they've spent their entire lives just staring at shadows cast on a blank wall. To them, those shadows are reality. This is us, stuck in the physical world. But then, a prisoner gets freed. He turns around, sees the fire, and realizes, wait, the shadows are just projections. He then makes this incredibly arduous climb out of the cave, ascending into the bright sunlight where he finally sees true reality, the forms themselves. This epic journey from darkness to light is the journey from ignorance to divine gnosis, or spiritual knowledge, and it's a concept that completely captivated both the patristic and Gnostic Christians.
Let's move to Plato's cosmic hierarchy and see how this builds. Because to explain exactly how the universe works, Plato mapped out existence itself. Right at the very top is God, the absolute one, directly echoing our guy Parmenides. Stemming directly from the one is what he called the nous, which basically translates to the divine mind or intellect. Now, this is the realm where those perfect, pure forms reside. The pure, untainted ideas of the good, justice, and beauty. It is the ultimate blueprint. But Plato also recognized a third element, the receptacle. This is basically a chaotic vessel external to God, filled with space and just formless matter. It's essentially the raw, totally unorganized building blocks of the physical universe, just swirling in a state of chaos. Naturally, this sets up a very dramatic need. Someone, or something, needs to bring order to all this chaos.
Enter the demiurge, or the craftsman. Plato proposed that this creator entity looks at the perfect blueprint of the forms up in the divine mind and then uses them to mold and organize the chaotic matter inside the receptacle, effectively creating the physical universe we know today. Now, interestingly enough, this specific concept of a secondary creator, the demiurge, it became one of the absolute most fiercely debated topics between the Orthodox Christians and the Gnostics.
When you put all of Plato's metaphysical schema together, you get this breathtakingly detailed map of existence. And this brilliantly illustrates how all these Greek elements combine to form the exact structural blueprint for the human condition. It gave early Christians the vocabulary they needed to divide our existence into spirit, mind, soul, and body.
The ultimate payoff of all this philosophical borrowing? Well, it's perfectly summed up by this amazing quote from St. Augustine, one of the most towering figures in Christian theology. Look at how explicitly he maps Plato's concept of the form of the good directly onto the Christian God. He writes, "And what is that good but God?" You see, Augustine and his contemporaries didn't reject Greek philosophy at all. They baptized it. They took Plato's ultimate abstract concept and simply gave it a divine personality. So, to wrap it all up, the theology that we recognize today absolutely did not just appear out of thin air. Its bedrock was deeply built on 700-year-old philosophical DNA. We traced it from Pythagoras' mathematical harmony of the immortal soul, to Heraclitus' eternal ordering logos, to Parmenides' unknowable one, and finally to Plato's brilliant synthesis of the divine forms. The fierce, world-changing debates of the early church were, at their core, essentially arguments over how best to apply this incredibly rich Greek heritage to their newly emerging faith.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating final question to ponder. If the very roots of our modern religious and metaphysical beliefs are actually ancient Greek, it really makes you wonder, what other concepts do we take for granted as absolute truth? What other shadows are we still just staring at on the cave wall today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.